is now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Kate, we're on the cusp of spring, and this is our March edition of Learning Now TV. Tell us who's on the show.
Well, I saw a meme the other day and it said that you get a second winter or a full spring, then a second winter, and then real spring. So it feels like we're on the edge of the real spring now, thank goodness. But we've got a packed show for you today. So Nick Hernandez, who's CEO at 360 Learning, joins Nigel for a chat. I managed to pin down Nadia Khan after a few missed attempts to talk about some fantastic research from Mind Tools. Always really good insights there, building on the legacy of the benchmark and the towards maturity work. Some longitudinal data there, which I'm a big fan of. And then Don Taylor joins us to talk about his learning sentiment survey as well. So lots of research. And we've also got Toby Kepler, his fifth episode on employee experience design. And as ever, Rob Clark joins us for a roundup of all the latest L&D news.
Lots of good research, lots of interesting interviews. It's going to be a great show, so enjoy it.
Enjoy. So I'm thrilled to be here today with a many-time guest on Learning Now Television. Donald Taylor is the lead author of the annual Global Sentiment Survey, which has just been released, and tells us some interesting things and maybe some not so surprising things. But there's a lot of great analysis in there. It's amazing. It's free to download, and I'm sure that we'll put the details up before the end of the interview. But Don, thank you for joining us yet again on Learning Now TV.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Kate.
Tell us what you sort of thought at the outset. You know, there's always a plan, there's always a bit of a hypothesis when one does a piece of research. So take us back to the beginning.
All right, back to November 2023, and I'm hoping that, firstly, that there'll be something different this year, because for the previous 3 years, reskilling and upskilling has been number one on the survey. And we just had this uptick with AI the previous year because ChatGPT was launched 1 week before the survey was launched. So I thought, well, that's interesting. Let's see what happens this year. And it will be absolutely no surprise to anybody that, of course, AI completely smashed every record, every number on the survey. So from initial excitement when the first votes started coming in, because I watched it every day, from initial excitement, it was like this feeling of dread. Oh, my Lord, this is so utterly predictable. And it's skewing everything. AI is dominating the survey and nothing else gets a look in. Although some things do, to be fair. And just looking beneath the surface of the excitement around AI does tell you a few stories.
I like can you tell us sort of maybe the top 5?
Yes.
Maybe, that way, because it's a long list, right?
It's a list of 16, and I appreciate in today's YouTube, TikTok generation, that's too many things for people to hold in their head. So looking at it, the top 5, and actually, seriously, the top 5 is important because there's a real break between number 5 and number 6 on the survey this year. And that tends to be replicated throughout the years, but it's particularly strong this year. The top 5 is AI, reskilling, upskilling, skills-based talent management, personalization, and then learning analytics. And what's interesting is that's quite similar to the results of the survey, the top 5 in 2020, before the pandemic. Everything changed during the pandemic, but it's notably different from the results of the survey in 2016, when it was much more focused on delivery. We had mobile learning, micro learning and mobile delivery were in the top 5. And so is collaborative and social learning, which was in the top 5, 2016, 2020, but not this year. For me, what that top 5 we've got this year tells us is, yes, all the noise is about AI, and rightly, because It was number one across every work group. It was number one in every region in the world. It sucked up all the votes. But actually, it's one part of a larger interest that L&D has with data and skills generally. And what we're going to see, I think, this year, 2024, and in succeeding years, is the use of AI in the service of the understanding of data and the delivery of skills development in a smart way after the initial fuss dies down, which is all around content generation.
Yeah. Okay. So there's several things I want to pick into there. So
I threw a lot of stuff. You asked me one simple question. I just threw a lot of stuff at you.
That's all right. Well, I came prepared. I did read the report in advance.
Good. Thank you.
With the let's pick into the data stuff first. So what the two parts for me are the kind of the data aspect and the skills-based talent management. So I'm thrilled to see those connections coming through because, I mean, obviously, like doing the work that I'm doing where I'm doing it currently, learning is just one part of that much bigger whole. And there is a real convergence around the skills challenge. I always think of it, it's like a knot, like the people are trying to untie, and not necessarily getting that far because partly I think maybe they haven't thought about the bigger picture and we're thinking too much around learning. But that data question, that ties in for me because you can't solve, L&D can't solve for skills on its own. And so the data part of that, bringing in data from elsewhere into the organisation is a big part of that, I think.
Well, I'd agree. And I would add that this is a challenge for learning and development, which traditionally, and I'm sorry if people get bored of hearing me say this, but I've been in this field for a long time. And when I started doing it in the mid-1980s, it was all about delivering content. It is still about delivering content, even though the world has changed considerably. And I think L&D needs to change with that. So we need to focus away from content towards skills is one part of what we need to focus towards, but really what we need to focus on is the strategic value to the business. And then there are a range of ways in which you achieve strategic value. The most important is probably through skills, but I don't want to get completely bewitched by skills in the same way that everyone's bewitched by AI. These are ways of getting the job done, and the job is let's help individuals and organizations flourish. Sorry, Kate, you were about to say something.
No, I was just going to say excellent point, because skills are not the end objective in and of themselves. So, yeah, I really agree with that. And then the second part was you sort of mentioned that content is only one part of it. It feels like lots of people are thinking about AI in L&D through the lens of content. Is that just the first rung on the ladder, do you think?
I've got this whole thing about looking at how people adapt to new technologies and how new technologies are absorbed from being something that's completely new to being something that's completely run-of-the-mill. My analogy is always the sound system, or the approach we have to sounds. We start with a transistor radio, we go to a boombox, which is just the same thing as a transistor radio, but just louder. The next step on that was the Walkman. The same functionality, you can walk around with your music, but now it's personal. And then to the iPod, which is personal and electronic rather than analog. And it's analog, and it's a completely different infrastructure. So going from transistor radio to iPod is a huge revolutionary step. It's not done all at once. And you always start with that boombox phase where you just do the same thing you used to do, but just do it bigger. And that's what's happening now. And I don't have a problem with that, the idea that, okay, we're going to use these Gen AI tools to create more content. But if we stop there in our use of AI, then we are unfortunately allowing ourselves to be stuck back in the basement, put in the training ghetto, in that place where we are different from the rest of the organization, and all we are good for is the delivery of training courses. That's part of the job, but it can't be the whole of the job.
So if you were a betting man and thinking ahead to, what 2024, the rest of 2024 looks like, How do you see it playing out? How do you see the Gen AI adoption playing out in the short term?
In the short term, so 2023 was the year of attraction to AI. 2024 will be the year of action. We can see this already. People are actually doing things with AI that they weren't even touching last year. I mean, when Egler, Vinalskaita and I did that paper on the state of play with AI and L&D, released on the annual at the anniversary of the launch of ChatGPT, 45% of employers had only done experimentation or nothing with AI. And these were people who were interested enough to reply to the survey.
Yeah.
So not much actually happened last year. That's changing now. We can see things happening. So we're going to move into action this year. It will be largely focused initially on content. We know that from the survey I'm running at the moment. Results will be out in early April. We know still that most of the work is being done around content, but the next step is personalization. Personalization meaning some way of looking at the data associated with people and what they need, or perhaps the mechanism by which it'll be most effective to deliver content to them. But it's more than just creating more content. So it'll be skewed. It won't be like a normal distribution. There'll be a vast long tail of people who won't be doing anything, and there'll be a few people who will be doing a bit of stuff with this, and some people doing some extraordinary things. And that's already happening. There are some great stories, just a few of them. So that skew will continue this year, and as the stories about great uses of AI pick up and get better heard, more people will be inspired. So we're seeing the initial base level of last year moving towards action this year, and then much more widespread distribution of activity in 2025.
And obviously learning technologies is looming large to sort of change your hats
Yes.
quickly. Do you have any early stories, use cases starting to come through that we're going to hear about at the conference?
Yeah, there'll be a couple of use cases about AI, but I was very careful putting the program together for learning technologies this year that we didn't focus entirely on AI, because that's not the only thing that L&D does. It's really important that we remember that we are also thinking about developing ourselves. Do we have the digital skills that we need, for example? Do we have the understanding of data that we need? Do we have doing the day job? Are we good enough at dealing with compliance? Do we have a wide view of what's happening in technology? And it's not just about AI. So it was very important to have a program that didn't just focus on AI. I love a nice biscuit the same as everyone, but I can't have a dinner which consists just of nice biscuits. So you've got to have a wide spread for people to feast on.
Yeah, I like not, it's about cutting through the hype. I always think that Learning Tech does a really good job of that.
Thank you. Also, Kate, important question. What's your favourite biscuit? Do you like the pink wafers or the, I don't know, hobnobs?
Pink wafer?
Well, the classy ones.
Bottom of the biscuit barrel.
Really? Okay. Go on then.
Chocolate hobnob supreme. I'll never forget the Peter Kay sketch when he talked about how they're like the dunkers, the king of the dunkers. Every time. I can't keep them in the house. So
great. No. Very good.
And then finally, what advice, other than downloading the report, which is really valuable and, as I say, free to air, as it were. So definitely go and check that out. But what advice would you give learning leaders, learning professionals who are dipping their toe into the Gen AI arena?
I think the key thing is to follow some of the people who are doing good stuff in this field and are sharing practical stuff about it, and particularly on LinkedIn. I mean, Ethan Mollick is a great guy to follow, based out of New York, who's just all over AI, not for L&D necessarily, but all over it. Ross Stevenson is doing some really good stuff, sharing some good stuff. Egla Vinaskyte, I've always mentioned her name, sharing useful insights. Get out there and share, and also network. So if you're in London, Joshua Voller does a really good AI meetup, and also does an L&D AI meetup. And I should also say, if you are downloading the report, the Global Sentiment Survey, it's got questions in it. Please don't regard it as being the answer to very much. It's much more a tool for provoking questions and provoking your question. And that idea of networking, perhaps read it in conjunction, either simultaneously or asynchronously with colleagues, and discuss those questions and others that come up. It's a way of provoking your thinking and hopefully getting you to ask some questions about how you could use technology generally and AI in L&D.
I love that. I love the idea of a workbook and sort of building on the practicalities of the findings. We do have Egla coming on the show in a couple of months' time with some new research. So she's just putting that to bed at the moment. So that's very exciting. But Don, as always, thank you very much. And we'll see you at Learning Technologies.
Looking forward to it, Kate.
Rob Clark is back. He's got a regular slot with all the news and views and the happenings, the mergers. We don't have any separations anyway, the mergers that are going on in the industry. You should be in touch with Rob and his learning news. It's always relevant, and he's there regularly for us too. So enjoy Rob's contribution.
Learning systems, now a crucial piece of tech in every business. We have the latest market developments. A new extended reality design skills lab has opened in the heart of London. Nick Jones from L&D recruiter Blue Eskimo returns with the latest on job mobility. Learning systems, now a crucial piece of tech in every business. Once a training course management and delivery mechanism, today they enable performance, mobility, productivity, and ultimately help businesses adapt to change. Each February, Fosway publishes a report into the learning systems market and charts the leading vendors. And this year's is out. Its aim is to help learning practitioners understand the choices available and provide insights into market developments and the direction of the vendors.
There's been real mixture of fortunes across the industry this year. So I have a feeling that part of this is to do with what we're kind of terming the sugar rush of what went on during COVID, where everybody needed to go through digital transformation and therefore needed a learning system. So there are probably fewer first-time buyers, if you like, just at the moment. And so some of the vendors are finding only being able to get maybe single-digit growth from a customer perspective. And then there are others that are completely bucking that trend and are flying. So it's been a real mixture. We've also seen that from another economic situation that is that the need for increasing prices. And so I've actually noticed this year, when I've been looking at the total cost of ownership of all the vendors, all of them have tended to increase with inflation the prices, where it's been pretty flat for quite a number of years. So yeah, there's an impact, definitely.
I'm at the School of Science and Technology at City University of London. It is about to open a brand new extended reality design skills lab. It wants to bring extended reality into its degree courses and train the next generation of learning developers to build workplace learning applications using extended reality.
The main reason why we set up this AR/VR Learning Center is to take this technology, immersive technology, and enhance education. That's my first priority. How can we make learning better using immersive technology, where we are actually using AR/VR technology as part of regular undergraduate lectures? This learning center, AR/VR Learning Center, is capable of training industrial colleagues. And the whole idea there is not just to learn the technology, but learn the full process so that you can develop an application professionally.
If you think about XR, it's more than just virtual reality or augmented reality or mixed reality. It's the whole production. It's a new medium to consume, to create and to consume content. So it's important that not only we teach and they need to acquire the knowledge how to build this technology, these experiences using VR and AR, but also they need to understand how to design, so how to storyboarding, how to storytelling, and then how to manage, and roll out XR learning programs inside organization at scale.
Fewer learning and development practitioners are changing jobs. More of those that do only move if they have another job to go to. More were made redundant in 2023, and the number of those still out of work is up. But it's a mixed picture. The annual work and salary survey in L&D has the latest employment data on how L&D practitioners are changing jobs.
There has been fewer people change jobs, but I think we have to take that in the context of what we saw in 2021 and 2022, which was a really significant amount of trading, if you like, within the jobs market in learning and development, large increases in new roles being created, and a lot of people moving positions. 52% have remained in the same role versus 66% last year. So there is a trend of moving, but you can't really explain that without thinking about that redundancy question. So redundancies, so forced moves, career progression. So there is a trend towards less movement in roles, but there is a tendency towards people being maybe a little bit more concerned about keeping the role that they have and making the most of the opportunity that they have currently.
With the acquisition of OnScreen, Learning Pool entered the digital adoption platforms market.
OnScreen makes information accessible and contextual to users within applications. So essentially, instead of struggling to find information, trying to remember training, a user is able to find the knowledge that they need in order to execute a process or do a job directly within the application in the context of the process that they're executing. And OnScreen is able to guide them live within that application at any point, and is able to provide contextual knowledge in the form of announcements, launchers, tooltips to ensure compliance, to ensure productivity and upskilling of the users, depending on their role and the task that they're doing.
That's all for this bulletin. Thanks to all my guests. As usual, they had much more to say than I've been able to include here. Their full interviews are on the website, along with more on all of the stories ticking across your screen. Next month, we're at Learning Technologies. Until then, thank you for watching. Back to Kate and Nigel.
Upskill and inform your learners with Mind Tools for Business. Empower your people to thrive at work and help them step up and meet everyday workplace challenges with confidence. Our toolkit provides unlimited access to thousands of quality-assured resources, all in one place. It's easy to use and on demand, anytime, anywhere. Experience stress-free onboarding with dedicated client partner support. And get access to our library of industry insight and expert analysis. Perform, manage, lead with Mind Tools for Business. Visit mindtoolsbusiness.com to find out more.
I'm thrilled to be here today with Nadia Khan, who is Chief Impact Officer, which I love, at Mind Tools. This interview has been a long time coming. So we've had trains, planes and automobiles in between. But Nadia, thank you for being with us today. Obviously, great supporter of Learning Now TV. And at the end of the year, you always, well, it's 2 decades now of the benchmark report that was originally started by Towards Maturity, but you put out some great research and actually now feels like a really good moment to take stock of some of that and think about sort of where some of that data has come from and how that's unfolding as the year goes on. So can you talk to us sort of high level, because there is so much in these reports?
Absolutely. And Kate, thank you so much for inviting me. You're absolutely right. We're really, really supportive of all of the great work that Learning Now TV, yourself, Colin and the team do in enriching and emboldening the sector, I think is probably the right way to say it, to really have some of those critical conversations. So thank you very much for that introduction to our thought leadership. Thought leadership is really at the heart of Mind Tools. And so for more than 20 years, as you quite rightly pointed out, firstly as Towards Maturity, and then as Mind Tools for Business, we've been collecting data about learning and development in organisations. And in that time, we've developed quite a deep and refined understanding of the behaviours and practices that define what we top performing L&D teams. So in 2023, to celebrate our kind of 20 years, we published 3 parts of what we would normally do as a single annual report. in the first, we looked back over the data we collected from more than 11,000 L&D leaders have fed into this worldwide since 2003 to identify what we consistently see as markers of maturity. And in the second report, we concentrated on one of the most significant challenges L&D teams face today, which is how they establish strategic and business alignment. And in the third, we went slightly off-piste. I gave the team a really, really broad remit on that one. And it was really to encourage L&D to kind of step outside of their comfort zone. And we explored what the modern L&D role kind of looks like and how it can support business transformation in the context of kind of three megatrends: digitalization, climate change, and demographic shift. So it was a slightly alternative approach to how we put the annual reports out, but it was what we were really trying to do was to say, in some cases, you know, despite all the changes we've experienced as an L&D industry in the last 2 decades, consistently we are seeing similar kind of patterns emerging. So top performing teams who have the biggest impact in business are the ones that are prioritizing things like coaching and collaboration. And, you know, issues like, you know, the connectivity between L&D teams and business are consistently still proving to be a challenge for the organizations that we work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I love the way that you cut and diced it. I think it makes it sort of feel really much more accessible. And also that the mega trends piece, I think it just encourages everyone to, as you say, step outside, because, you know, people are naive if they think that some of these, you know, geopolitical global factors are not trickling down and having an impact. Even going back to your job title, I love the fact that it's impact, because I think that's, you know, we consistently have this conversation on Learning Now TV, that the impact of what we're doing is, you know, it can still get lost, and that's a real challenge. So that alignment with the business is still something that so many organizations are striving for, and there's been some great strides, and you know, we talk to some people who are making, you know, real progress with that, but it can be hard, especially in, you know, maybe more traditional organizations, and people have a perception around what L&D is supposed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really interesting is in the first report, we talk why, you know, we explain that some of L&D's biggest kind of battles and opportunities also, because there's always a flip side to that, have been to do with technology. And many organizations are still struggling to engage learners in 2023. And we kind of focused on that a little bit in the report and said, you know, what are those missed opportunities? Social collaborative learning, better use of social media, you know, that type of thing. And I think what's really, really interesting is that, you know, in the second report, we looked at that only 28% of L&D teams currently work with senior leaders to agree on organizational metrics and KPIs, which is quite stark when you look at that and you just think, well, good God, what are the rest doing? You know, what is that conversation that is happening within the business if it's not aligned? But equally, we looked at the challenge is that organizational priorities are often very, very short term, you know, and business leaders are not always great at getting the organization to think in that medium to long term. I think every senior leadership team has this aspiration to be more medium and long term. And I think the challenge is that they're not always giving the people function broadly, but specifically we're talking about L&D, they're not always giving them that mid to longer term bandwidth to say, we really want to think about future proofing. It's all very, very tactical. And I guess in that sense, you can't really expect L&D to just drop things because, you know, that's no longer important anymore. That makes it very hard.
Well, you get what, and I always say this, but you get what you measure. So if that isn't
absolutely
coming down, and you know, back to what you know Mind Tools do, you know, part of what you do at your core, that focus and talking about trends over 20 years, that need for great leadership, training, support, mentorship, coaching, that is still a huge need. And, as people age out, leaders age out and retire, and I've just been talking to an amazing learning leader this morning who's just about to hang up his boots. The next generation's got to come through, and how well equipped are they, especially in this sort of volatile, ever-changing world in which we find ourselves.
Exactly. And I think the final report, it's interesting you say that, Kate, because one of the things we talk about in the final report is that one very important capability for future L&D teams and future L&D leaders is digital intelligence. And that's what we're calling it. And in the report, we explore this capability, its importance for learning, and how really, by harnessing and being more digitally intelligent, they can help their businesses transform in that digital space as well. And what was really interesting is we looked at generational differences through our data, especially for things like preferences for learning-related tools, resources, and approaches. And in general, we found that differences across generations were subtle and in many cases didn't exist at all. All employees, regardless of age or generation, told us they valued, funny enough, what they told us was that they valued working with other colleagues to address challenges at work more than anything else. But I think if you look at those two things in terms of being digitally savvy in that space and building those digital skills and that digital capability, means that when organizations are going through some of that digital transformation broadly within the business, they are comfortable to come to L&D and say, you guys kind of get it. You're growing those skills yourself. You're developing in that space yourself. And I think that's going to be really, really interesting, as you say, in this kind of changing environment where everything is coming at us at speed.
Yeah, like a million miles an hour. And that was kind of my last question for you today is, there's been a, we're here sort of coming towards the end of Q1 in 2024. There's a bit of daylight between when the reports were published. I'm hoping Colin's going to put the link for the reports up, because they're really worth it. And I've been, like Deloitte's report, Global HCM Trends, they talk a lot about sustainability, some of those key threads that people should be thinking about there. But, are you starting to see anything kind of come to fruition, or where things are changing so quickly, things are pivoting based on kind of what you published at the end of the year?
I think what's really, really interesting for us, and I'm going to place it into the context of how we're actually looking at our thought leadership as well, Kate, going forward in 2024. So kind of monitoring and looking at these things for the last 20 years at that very macro level has been great. And it's something we're going to continue to do, because you kind of look at the macro and the micro together. But I think what's really interesting for us is that most organizations are telling us, people who are regularly doing the learning performance benchmark or working with us in the insight space, a lot of them are kind of telling us that we kind of understand what some of these challenges are at the meta level. What we really need to get down to is the nitty-gritty of how are we going to embed some of these changes. So we know these changes are happening to our organizations, whether that's the onset of AI. And I think we could talk about, people saying within 2 or 3 years, it's going to be, half of the things that we've got out there in the vendor market won't be relevant. I'm not too sure about that, if I'm honest. I think that pace is going to take a bit longer to kind of pull through. But clearly for some of our more future thinking organizations, they will be cognizant and aware of that. But what we're hearing a lot of is we kind of understand the technological advancements that are coming at us, and we're trying to meet them and understand what we need to have in the future, and what do we need for today, and what do we need to move to. But actually, what's really, really interesting for them is how do we embed some of these changes within our organizations? And a lot of that is to do with culture.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway from this conversation today. Time flies, so, and I could talk to you all day, and I think we're going to try and talk to you about AI kind of specifically, because it's a huge area of interest, but I separately. But I think that kind of, think about that embedding. Go and read the reports if you haven't already. They're like free, amazing, free on the Mind Tools website, and but that sense of not panicking, taking time, thinking about the big picture. Yeah, do the brilliant basics. I'm a big fan of that, building those foundations. But think about how to embrace and embed. That's really great advice, Nadia. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today.
No worries. Thank you for having me, and look forward to coming back.
Are you ever in meetings or events where one or two people dominate? It doesn't have to be that way. You can get an equal voice for your people through liberating structures. Liberating structures are 33 structures that give people a full equal voice. Check them out on www.happy.co.uk and type in liberating structures. We do them online, we do them in the classroom, and they are brilliant.
Getting new starters up to speed is something that most of us will wrestle with at some time in learning and development. And this month, Toby Kang continues his series on employee experience design with a look at how to get your new starters up and running and performing quickly.
Hello there, it's Toby again with your employee experience design series. We are now on episode 5. Which is the 4th F, because we did an introductory video, and our 4th F is flourish. So just to recap where we're at so far, we fascinated our audience by attracting them towards engaging with the organization on social media. We have found the right fit through a 2-way process of finding out whether the relationship's going to work. We've fused that relationship. We've built those 2 parties together over a trial period where we've discovered whether it's right for either of those parties or not, and built that relationship up. And now it's time to get on past the trial and start doing the work, essentially, and all about enabling employees to flourish. Now, this is where learning and development typically sits in this one area. But as I said in all the previous videos, I truly believe the skill set and the approaches learning and development have, especially when it comes to the ambition for doing human-centered design, it needs to be able to do that within this wider HR strategy, which is what this kind of whole series is about, and being able to expand that remit through an effective HR strategy. However, we're now at this point in Flourish where we're kind of all comfortable, so I'm not going to dwell too much on what learning and development should do to help employees flourish, because there's a lot of stuff out there already. But I need to highlight what I think needs to change to enable learning and development people to be able to have that maximum impact. There's 2 things I want to talk about. The first one is an always learning culture. Every podcast interview I've done this year has asked the same question, and that is, how do you create an always learning culture in your organization? And controversially or not controversially, depending on what you think, you can't. A learning and development cannot create an always learning culture. That is an impossible thing to achieve. Why? Because always learning only happens when people are in the right environment, have the right systems and processes and people around them to be able to want to learn. Now, all those things are not within the realm of what learning and development does within an organization at the moment. This is why that's expanded role for anyone who can apply human-centered design across the employee experience becomes really important, because if you can make that employee experience as good as it can be, then always learning will just happen, because people will be motivated to do that. They'll want to be the very best at their roles. They'll want to make their lives easier by adopting artificial intelligence. They'll want to be agile and be able to move into different roles if they are treated, respected, and cared for in the right way. So I think the first point here is, don't try and achieve a always learning culture by being a learning and development team, because it's going to be pretty much nigh on impossible. That's my advice. The second one is to kind of change what a learning and development team is. Now, every learning and development team I've kind of worked with in the past 5 years kind of does way more than what it says on the tin. And that's great because the expanding skill set of all the different approaches to design, but then also, developing stuff as well, have moved on so much in the past 10 years. So much so that actually calling it learning and development now is a bit of a disservice, because these teams are now the very best people to be product and service managers for the HR function. So being able to craft products and services that alleviate the pains of employees is super important and creates a better employee experience. And you know what? When you create the better employee experience, you're more likely to create an always learning culture. So it takes a fundamental shift away from traditional learning and development to kind of go, okay, how do my team, who can do all this great stuff, not only think about how people learn and develop, but how do they get cared for, looked after, and supported in the workplace, way beyond just training and learning management systems. This goes through everything, through internal communications, reward, legal, all those kind of things that sit within HR are products and services that are offered to employees. And being able to design and present those in such a way that is better for employees will probably get you to your ultimate goal of creating that always learning culture. And then you kind of start relying less on content creation, because if those employees are hungry enough and motivated enough to go and learn, they'll go and seek out that information from wherever they can. And because of the internet, there's a lot of stuff out there where people can go and find the right stuff. It's more about the system and environment someone operates in to be able to want to go and do that. Now, I'm not saying stop creating content, because there will be some business specific stuff that you need to cover, but it relieves you of some of those content creation pains that I've talked to so many people about. Now, as I've said through this whole series, that is easier said than done, because you have to be able to operate within a wider HR strategy to enable that to happen. And this is where I believe L&D's biggest impact will come to potentially have a seat at any table, is to be able to start working with HR teams to craft what this future vision looks like, because you are probably the best people in your organization to do that. The final thing I will leave you with is the idea of customer service. So customer service teams, there are some great ones, and we all know that there are some awful ones, but customer service teams are the ones that can respond to those queries quickly and easily if they are one of the good ones. And I go back to the chatbot that I talked about, I think, in the last video, and it's to be able to make sure that there is a team that can look after these queries and concerns quickly. Sometimes that's going to be through technology. Sometimes it will need to be a person. But again, once you've got this idea of product and service methodology within the organization, of course you're going to need a customer service team to back it up. And again, this is where we're taking those customer experience design principles and employing it to employee experience design. I'll see you next time for the last video in this series.
It's my great pleasure today to interview Nick Hernandez. Nick is the founder and the CEO of 360 Learning. Started in Paris, but now a global company with the C-suite distributed all around the world. He's speaking to me today from Paris. So first of all, Nick, welcome. Welcome to Learning Now Television. It's a pleasure to see you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for welcoming me here.
Tell me about 360-degree learning. What makes it different from other learning platforms, of which there are many, as you're well aware?
There are. When we started in 2010, and for 3-4 years, we were trying to find a market, a business, product market fit, as some people say. And at the time, the first innovation was that we put a very simple authoring tool integrated in a learning platform, which meant anyone could go on the platform and start creating courses. And in a matter of minutes, have a course, an e-learning course online, and start shipping it to learners. At the time, that was really disruptive because the standard was SCORM. So if you wanted to create a course, the go-to playbook was to hire an instructional designer, work on a storyboard, etc., etc. Multiple steps that would take 6 months and cost you between $10,000 and $100,000. And then you would have to upload that SCORM package to a learning platform, which often would require the learning admin to do something on the platform. So all that was very long and complex process just to ship a course. So we looked at it and we said, what if we create an authoring tool? It's going to be simpler than the usual SCORM authoring tools, even in 2010. And we're going to put that very basic, like Instagram style editor in the hands of everyone, so that they can, instead of having to pay 20 to 100K and take 6 months, they can create a course and ship it instantly. That value proposition enabled us to be in the market because we had something different. And a lot of people were looking up on Google. They were looking for fast e-learning platform, fast e-learning creation. And we would advertise on these keywords. They would find our landing page that was saying, quickly create and ship courses. And they would try 360 learning and become customers. And that's how we could take off and start being in business.
Nick, Nick, can I just interrupt? That sort of coincided with the moment where big, clumsy, clunky, instructional design, over-designed courses were being pushed away in favor of instant snippets. We need the learning now. So you kind of got on a wave there. You picked that moment when that's what the world wanted in many ways.
It was, and there was a lot of momentum around MOOCs too. So, I mean, there was traction around e-learning, and also I think overall digital adoption kept growing, and that helped us because maybe at a time you really needed an instructional designer to create a course, but over time people started to feel that they can do stuff on the internet themselves. Instagram, for sure. There is the Instagram Photoshop story, and we kind of see ourselves as the Instagram of the learning space. Like, we put photo editing, course editing in the hands of everyone. So that was the starting point. But from there, and that was purely bottom up, no non-strategic, our approach, but we discovered that our customers were, in many cases, these companies that had a lot of knowledge, expertise, subject matter experts. Like, I don't know, they're building motor engines for airplanes, and they need to train. They have like 3 people who know how to assemble some part of the engine, and they really need these people to create courses to train others. And it really can't happen in a centralized way. It has to happen in a very decentralized way. But that raises a lot of questions. How do you control quality, for instance? If anyone's going to create these courses, how do you make sure these courses have certain standards of qualities? How do you make sure you create the right courses, the courses that people need? So we engineered a platform around that decentralized e-learning subject matter experts question, and we called that collaborative learning. And I think that very specific angle around internal expertise, and we do cover all the other use cases, compliance, partner training, sales training, but really what makes us different, where we're really good at scaling, is when there are, in some cases, we have a customer that has the most as 2,200 subject matter experts creating courses on the platform. So that's really a lot of people and a lot of courses, but we managed to organize them, prioritize them. And nowadays with AI, generative AI, we even help them even more in that course creation. and knowledge.
So it's the idea you've got a subject matter expert and a cluster of other people who will help turn it from something in someone's head into something that is instantly available or relatively instantly available for everyone else. Is that the idea? That's the collaboration. That you're not taking the learning away and saying, Nick, you're the expert. Tell me, and I'll put together this long course for you, and I'll get it, make sure it's perfect. You're saying, you do it, you tell us, and then we can shape it and deliver it.
Yeah, so it goes through multiple steps from understanding what the workforce in a specific company needs, and we have learning needs. So we ask people can tell on the platform, they can document which courses they would need to increase their performance. We also have skills maps to understand what are the skills that might disappear, critical skills that are at risk of fading away in the company. So that gives us a sense of, or that gives the customer a sense of priorities, which courses need to be created.
Yes.
Imagine you're in industry. You've documented your skills matrix. Now you want to maintain it. One way of doing that, very simply, you're going to monitor all the job descriptions that are coming out in your industry. And with a generative AI, OpenAI, Mistral, whatever model, we extract the skills that are starting to appear in these job descriptions. And we tell your skills admin or L&D person, do you think these new skills that are appearing in your industry, in the job descriptions, do you want to merge them into, and we even make a suggestion of the job titles that should have that skill. We even make a suggestion of that skill, because when there is a skill like active listening, if you would take something everybody understand, active listening, you're going to document like at least 3, maybe 5 different levels, from a beginner to someone who can even teach it to someone else, right? And you're going to document what these levels mean. So it's not just detecting the skill, it's documenting the levels, describing the levels. But we're going to push that, and someone in L&D just has to say, I confirm I'm adding this to that job, or I don't confirm I'm not adding it. But the work, so first it gets automated, it's push, and the work to add it, confirm it or not confirm it, is just one click. So suddenly with that, I'm not saying suddenly all the challenges resolved, but you can see how that technology is going to change the equation when it comes to maintaining the skills ontology up to date.
Yeah, it's almost, Nick, it's almost like when at the very beginning, what you did was you accelerated the process. What you're doing now is exactly that. You're accelerating the process. This laborious manual process, the 6 months to develop a course, you turned it into instant. The year-long process of boringly collating and building ontologies and typologies of skills, you just instantly turn that around. So what you're doing is kind of creating opportunities for people to do what they want to do, but at lightning speed. Is that a fair summary?
I believe that's what technology does, and we apply it to L&D, but I want to be humble. What you describe, I think, is really the internet. It's putting the power in people's hand, and it in everybody's hand, and somehow is saying there is something that was an expertise that was reserved to some people, and now we're making it available to everyone, especially when it comes to information and like data and transforming data. As I mentioned earlier, when it comes to building an airplane engine, it's a different story. But I believe what the internet does is exactly that: is democratization. And
it's true, but the internet is kind of neutral. You need to leverage the internet, and I guess that's a really good word for 360 learning. You're leveraging those apps, that system, in order to provide for your customers what they want,
enabling the experts, leveraging the technology, and in a way that connects them. I really believe, we talk about learning. I like to say that's what's in my book, in the collaborative learning book. There are very deep reasons why people learn from other people. And when I mean deep, I mean it's how we are built. It's thousands of years of evolution. You have these fantastic things, mirror neurons. When you see someone do something, throw a ball, you have these neurons. If you're a kid, you're a 2-year-old, you see someone doing something, you have these neurons that get activated. You're already copying the gesture. But if we're explaining to you in a tutorial, it's going to be way more challenging. There's a good example with learning languages. You can look at this vocabulary list and practice hours a day your vocabulary list. But then you go in the country and in 10 minutes, you've learned 30 words. And that's because you're learning it from people. So I believe collaborative learning is about that. It's corporate learning. If it's top down and people believe the workforce is going to learn from a top down experience, it's not going to happen because humans are not built like that. They learn from other people, from seeing. So that's what we're trying to solve with technology too.
Yes. I'm so glad to hear that, because you're 100% right. I've gone on about Vygotsky from the 1970s. He was telling us that people learn in their peer groups.
Exactly.
That's the most efficient, effective way of learning. And at last, we have a platform that is just acknowledging that very simple fact that people learn better together and from each other.
Exactly.
Yes. Nick, this has been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. And I wish you luck with the platform. I think you're hitting a lot of buttons which need to be hit. And congratulations on taking it through from nearly 10 years now. And good luck for the next 10 years.
Thanks for the kind words, and thanks for doing this. It was fun.
Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the program. I hope you enjoyed the interviews and the information that we covered. Kate, what did you really enjoy?
Well, I mean, research is my, kind of my bag. I always enjoy talking about research. And you've got two very different approaches and views in the way that Mind Tools and Nadia is running her research, very deep, building on sort of those years of being able to cross compare and look at trends, and also the way that they're sort of starting to talk about sort of strategic sustainability and those kinds of things. I think really foundational insights for anyone in learning and development. And then the Learning Sentiment Survey is deliberately designed by Don to be very different to that. It's more of a pulse check. What's hot? I mean, I think that is actually the question. And I think it's so important to have the foundations right before we start diving into some of the Gen AI stuff, etc., which is going to build and accelerate on what we're doing right. But it might complicate things that we may be not doing so well or maybe doing wrong if we haven't got those foundations right first. So that was really one of my big takeaways this month.
Yeah, I think and Nick Hernandez, he shaped 360-degree learning through talking to potential customers about what was missing in the market. And that idea of collaborative learning came to him, not in a dream, but through talking to people and looking at what goes on in organizations. So kind of all three have different sorts of research. A quick dive by Don, a deep dive by Nadia, and a kind of sentiment survey as well, a talk to the people and field work by Nick. But they've all come up with some interesting contributions today. And I think if you merge them all, you end up with a real slice of insight into the industry at the moment. So they work together very well, I thought.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then I think, looking ahead, Learning Technologies is coming up in April. We're a lot of us there in London. And I think it will then be interesting to kind of go into that with some of that reflection and some of that purpose and intent in terms of, what are the areas that I'll be looking at, and what, for everybody else who's going as well. What are you wanting to take away, or what are you wanting to learn more about? There's so much on offer. I think it's good to be able to have some of those priorities, and maybe some of those insights from today's program will shape some of that for people.
Hope so. So you've mentioned Learning Technologies. That's on its way on the 17th and 18th of April. What else, Kate? There's something very important going on the 23rd of April, I think.
Well, this guy called
can you see what it is?
Nigel Payne keeps popping up
Oh, that's what it is.
with this webinar series that seems to be going down quite well. So on the 23rd of April, Nigel will be talking about adopting healthy habits, how to fail in order to learn, and how to ask for help. I need to go to that. Like, that's definitely the one for me. And the biggest lessons I've learned in my life have been from my failures, for sure.
Like all of us, Kate, like all of us.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is that in most organizations, you don't have permission to fail.
Yeah.
You get fired if you fail. So that natural cycle of learning through mistakes is shut off, or we just hide it. Basically, we just pretend it didn't happen, or we blame someone else, all of that stuff. So that takes us into learning HR tech and learning solutions in Orlando on the 23rd to the 25th of April. Probably there'll be a very thin crowd on the first day because they'll all be at my webinar on the 23rd. I don't know whether they're probably very worried in the Learning Guild at the moment. And what else? What else have we got?
And then we skip ahead to the 12th to the 13th of June for the Festival of Work here in London. And then the 24th of June, lovely Fiona McBride is putting on the HR Leaders Unconference. So I still need to book my ticket for that. And that is the subtext of that is leading with purpose in the HR profession, which I absolutely adore. Can't wait for that.
And that takes us right through to the next edition of LNTV, which will be on the 25th of April, which by coincidence happens to be my birthday. So it will be the birthday edition of Learning Now TV.
We better bring hats and presents then, Nigel.
I sincerely hope so. I'll be looking forward to it.
Well, enjoy the rest of your life, and we'll see you then.